Do you remember a time when you were put on the spot to make a comment or answer a question or share your opinion? How did that feel? And how did it go? Would you like to be more prepared for those unexpected situations and be more confident and get better results when you're put on the spot? Well, if so, you are in exactly the right place. Welcome to another episode, the 400th episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, which I'm guessing you are, you could have been with us live. And so that means you could be with us live for future episodes to find out when they're taking place so you could join us. The best way to do that is to go to our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to get all of the scoop and to join us in the future. Today's episode is brought to you by our newest product, the Productivity Intensive, a 45-day process to improve your productivity for the rest of your life. Learn more by going to remarkablepodcast.com/productivity. And with that, I'm going to bring in our guest. Right here he is. I can see he's already smiling, and that's a good sign. Here he is. Before I introduce him, let's see. Mark Strickland is saying hello. Hello, Mark Strickland. So let me introduce my guest today. His name is Matt Abrams. He is a leading expert in communication with decades of experience as an educator, author, podcast host, and coach. As a lecturer in organizational behavior at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, he teaches popular classes in strategic communication and effective virtual presenting. He received Stanford's Alumni Teaching Award for recognition of his teaching students around the world. He has helped countless presenters improve and hone their communication, including some who have delivered IPO roadshows, as well as, get this, everybody, TED Talks, World Economic Forum talks, and Nobel Prize presentations. He hosts the popular award-winning podcast, Think Fast, Talk Smart, the podcast. He is the author of 2 books, Speaking Up Without Freaking Out, 50 Techniques for Confident and Compelling Presenting, and his new book, why he's here today, Think Faster, Talk Smarter, How to Speak Successfully When You're Put on the Spot. Matt, welcome. So glad that you're here.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm excited to chat with you, and congratulations on 400 episodes. I don't even what element is associated with 400. I know platinum is like 75. I don't even know.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know what to bring you. So
how about
I'll just
say, I don't know.
I'll just say congratulations. How about that?
You know, all it proves, Matt, it just proves that I'm doggedly persistent. That's really what it proves. Nothing else. We'll leave it to you to decide if I'm any good at communicating. Since you're the communication expert, we'll have to go on.
You're clearly bringing value. If people keep tuning in after 400, well, we'll see. We'll get you to 400. I hope I don't ruin the streak.
Oh, you're not going to do that. We're already here. Right. So let's start here. I often ask people this because, you didn't wake up when you were 8 years old and say, I want to be a communications expert. You probably were thinking, I don't know, astronaut, fireman, professional football player. I don't know what you were thinking, but it probably wasn't this. So tell us very briefly a little bit about your journey as it relates to showing up and do it right in this book.
Well, so it's really funny. When I was writing the book, I really reflected back how speaking in the moment, which is what the book is all about, how to answer questions, give feedback, make small talk, all these spontaneous communication situations. As I was reflecting back, it turns out that this is something that's loomed large in my life for forever. With a last name Abrahams,
Abrahams starts with A-B.
Yeah, I always went first, and I never thought of it until I really dug into this topic. I've been spontaneous speaking my whole life. The teachers I always knew where I sat in every class, and I always knew I would be the person who went first. And so upon reflection, I've been doing this a lot, but really my interest in communication bubbled up when I was in my later boyhood, really. My mother did this thing that really, I remember it very clearly. My brother and I had a lot of toys, and my mom wanted us to get rid of them because we weren't using them. So we held a garage sale. And I grew up in a city where there were garage sales every weekend. Everybody would sell stuff. And my mother said to make us stand out when we made our garage sale signs, we had to spell the word garage wrong because that would draw attention. So if you put a B, you insert a B in the middle of garage, you get garbage. So we had a garbage sale and everybody else had garage sales. And it turns out we sold more stuff than anybody else in our city that weekend. My mother to this day believes that it's a result of us misspelling it and people saw it standing out and came by. I think people thought we were stupid and they'd get better deals. But what it taught me is that through language, through wording, you can actually influence people. And I remember that from a very young age. So as I had opportunities to study communication, and when I found out you could actually study it, I didn't know you could study communication till I was an undergraduate. I became very, very interested in it. And it's been something that I've done both in an applied sense when I ran learning and development organizations for companies, and as an academic, as somebody who studied it and now teaches it.
All right. So you talked about it. You've been giving this spontaneous talk for a long time in school. Everyone else got the chance to hear what you
Hear
said
me do
first,
it. Yeah.
right before they had to go. And yet, that's not the only reason you wrote the book, right?
No.
So you've already given us the basic idea how to speak successfully when you're put on the spot. I get that.
Right.
What are some of the situations? I mean, all of us might think of we're in a meeting and someone says, "What do you think?" But there's a
Yeah.
lot of other these situations. I
Yeah.
want you to give people a range of thinking about this as we dive in, because this is
Yeah.
even more prevalent than we might be thinking about.
Absolutely. And what really motivated the creation of the book was about 8 or 9 years ago, the deans at the business school at Stanford asked me to help our students, very bright students who knew the answers to questions when they were cold called by a professor, where the professor says, "Hey, what do you think?" They were not able to give good answers or answers at all. So they asked me, is there a way we can help them? And that's what really started the journey that ultimately ended up in the book. But you're right. Spontaneous speaking happens all over the place. It's not just answering questions, it's giving feedback in the moment. It's having to pitch or persuade when somebody says, "So, why should we follow that idea?" Or what's important about that? It has to do with introducing yourself or introducing others, giving toasts or tributes, apologizing, fixing the mistakes that we make. The technology doesn't work and all of a sudden you have to respond. It's about small talk. So much of what we do in our everyday lives, both professionally and personally, is spontaneous.
All right, so now we're all realizing that we do this all the time, and
Yeah.
now we're more self-aware than ever, Matt. So I appreciate that. What you talk about in the book, and what I'd like us to unpack. Now I know everybody. First of all, if you already are interested, you just need to go get a copy of the book. It's over. You can see, if you're watching, you can see it over Matt's shoulder. It's called Think Faster, Talk Smarter. You want to get a copy for sure. And obviously, you teach a quarter-long course, right? We're
Mhm.
not going to get through all of it by any stretch during our time, but I'd like you to start by sort of just giving us the 6 big steps. There's 6 things that
Right.
you say we need to do, and I completely agree, and it makes total sense. So, just very quickly, give us the 6 steps, and then we'll dive into 2 or 3 of them.
Sounds great. So the book is divided into 2 sections. The first section is about the 6-step methodology. I'm happy to go through that in a second. And then the second part of the book is really about applying it to those very situations we just talked about.
Right.
So the 6 steps can be subdivided into 2 major categories: mindset and messaging. When it comes to mindset, the first step has to do with managing anxiety. Anxiety is a critical element in all communication, but especially when we're put on the spot. So we need to learn to manage anxiety. From there, we have to disabuse ourselves of this notion of trying to be perfect and right in our communication. Part of what makes us anxious and part of what many people struggle with is we want to do it right. There is no right way to communicate. There's better ways and worse ways, but no one right way.
You
From
call
there,
that the unlock step.
yes, I do. So unlocking the potential you have, right? And then the next step has to do with seeing these situations as opportunities rather than threats. Many of us see, if I were to say to you, Kevin, "Hey, you get to have a Q&A after your talk." Most people don't go, "Oh, that's great. I'm really excited." Most people say, "Oh no, people are going to challenge me, threaten me." So we have to reframe these situations as opportunities, not threats. And then the final stage in the mindset piece, and this one people didn't expect to see, but it's so important, and that is listening. We have to be able to listen well so we can respond appropriately. So those are the steps that make up the mindset piece. And then once we have our mindset correct and have some ways of managing our anxiety and reframing, then we have to turn to how we say what we actually say. And that's where the messaging piece comes in. And the first part of that, step 5, is structure. Structuring messages is critical. And then finally is what I call the F word of communication, which is focus. Many of us in the moment, we ramble on and on and on. And in fact, we need to be more concise than detailed when it comes to spontaneous speaking. So those are the 6 steps. There's 6 steps everybody can employ. It takes some practice, but when you do it, it can make you feel so much better about your communication.
So as we just listened to those 6 things, I think a lot of people are thinking, yeah, I know people that have a hard time with that last one. They don't know when to be brief and be seated, right? And so
Yeah.
they're droning on and on and on.
Yeah, yeah.
And back to the mindset piece. That's one of the things we worry about. Like, am I going on and on? Am I continuing to talk?
Right,
When am I supposed to be done? Right? What's my cue to be
right.
finished? And so I love that. When I started to read the book,
Mhm,
um, I, though not as much as you, have done a lot of presentation skills
mhm,
training over the years, and in fact, we do some work with folks on doing it
mhm,
virtually as well. And we'll come to virtual before we're done. And I, like you, find that the biggest barriers are typically the mindset ones,
mhm,
and so I
mhm,
love that you spent so much of the time there. Um, and so the first one, which is to sort of calm ourselves down,
mhm.
I'd like to talk about that because people say, "Well, Kevin or Matt, how can I do that when I just been put on the spot in the moment?" But talk about what we can be doing ahead of time there, but also what can we do right now when you put me on the spot? What can I do to help calm myself, etc.
Sure, absolutely. So let me break it down in the way you said. So there's some things that you can do very specifically in the moment, and then there's some things you can do in advance of moments where we think we might have to speak spontaneously, or we know we will. I mean, if you go to a corporate party or you're at a conference, you know that small talk is part of it. So you can actually think about that in advance. If you're giving a presentation or running a meeting, you know that it's likely that people are going to ask you for feedback and ask you for or ask questions of you. So even though we don't know what the actual ask will be, we know that we are going to be asked. So there are things that we can prepare. But in
Yep.
that moment where all of a sudden we're put on the spot, we often feel incredible pressure to respond right away. And we can actually pause a little bit. You can take a breath. You can collect your thoughts. We feel like somebody asks a question and I have to answer right away. No, you can take a breath. But there are other things you can do to give yourself a little bit of space. One, ask clarifying questions. If somebody asks you for feedback, you can ask, do you want feedback to help in the future? Do you want feedback about just what happened? Do you want me just to really set up and listen more to what you have to say? By asking these clarifying questions, we buy some time. Similarly, we can paraphrase. Paraphrasing is where, in our own words, we get to the central core of what somebody has said. We don't repeat everything word for word, but in that paraphrase, it buys time. In fact, I did that right before I started answering this question. I said, I'm going to take those 2 pieces. I'm going to answer the second one first. That was my way of giving myself some time to think of the answer. So there are lots of things we can do to take that intensity of that in the moment, I must respond quickly, and give ourselves a breath. And speaking about a breath, I think deep breathing is one of the most important things we can do to help center ourselves and calm ourselves down. And when you breathe, you want to make sure it's a low belly breath. If you've ever done yoga or Tai Chi, it's a deep belly breath. And you want your exhale to be slightly longer than your inhale because it is during the exhalation that the magic happens. So there are things that you can do right in that moment to help. Now, beforehand, like I said, you can remind yourself in most of these communication situations, we want to remind ourselves that we are in service of our audience. We are bringing value to them. We often get locked in ourselves and see that spotlight shining on us. If we can turn that light and shine it elsewhere on the audience, it helps. Whenever you're speaking, especially on the spot, people want to hear from you. If you're answering a question, people want to know the answer. If you're giving feedback, people want to know the feedback. If you're toasting at something, people want to hear your kind words. So when we remind ourselves that we're in service of our audience, it can help. And that's something you do going into these events. So there are things you can do during, and there are things you can do before.
It's actually one of the things that I love about the redefine step, that when you talk about that, is that it's not about us, it's about the
Yeah,
audience.
that's right.
And when we can make that shift and remember that shift,
Mhm,
it helps
mhm.
us a great deal. If all four of these first steps are about mindset, you've already you've already hinted at something that applies certainly really to all four, but certainly to three of the four. And one is that it's not about us, and so that takes some of the pressure off of us. It's about what can I deliver to someone else, so that changes it. And the other thing in the unlock step that you talk about is the idea of you frame it as a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Frame it as a conversation, and I've
Mhm.
got it on the wrong one there. Frame it as a conversation, such that that also sort of takes the anxiety down, right? Say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so many of us see these situations as performance. These are things that we have to perform properly. In other performance situations, if you're a musician, a dancer, a singer, an athlete, there is a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Yet we carry that notion with us in our communication. There is no right way to communicate. There are better ways and worse ways, but no one right way. So if we remind ourselves that this is just a conversation, I have lots of conversations. Most people feel they're pretty good at conversations. So if we see the interaction as conversation, it helps. And there are things we can do to make it feel more conversational. For
So give us a
example,
couple.
yeah, asking questions. Conversations are really question asking. So instead of me feeling like I have to tell you everything, I could ask questions of you, and that can help. The language we
So let
use
me just stop
matters.
you there before you go to language.
Sure.
So, you are, among other things, a lecturer, right? And most people say, well, I don't want to be a lecturer. I don't want to come across as a lecturer. And I'm not even sure if I have something to say that's worth lecturing about. But when
Yes.
you turn that into making it about the other person and making it about questions, that takes most of that away from
That's
us,
absolutely right. When you
right?
focus on the other person, and I would hope that anybody who's ever taken a class from me would say, "I don't lecture. What
Well,
I
but you
do
know
is I
what I
tee up."
mean.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
I'm
I
using
know,
that
but
word because so
yeah,
often people say, "Well, I don't really have anything to add here." Like,
right,
in a meeting situation, like, I
yeah.
don't know, right? What do I have to bring to the table here?
Well, and there are times where people can be intimidated or not sure what to contribute, and if that happens, I suggest you can add a lot of value just by summarizing what's transpired. You can paraphrase or summarize. That's not adding any new value. You're not adding new information, but you really help it to codify or to categorize what's been said. And that's a very valuable skill. So when people come to me and say, I'm in these meetings and I just don't have anything to say, I'll say, try to paraphrase or try to connect ideas together. And that in and of itself is a really important step. So getting back to language just very quickly, when I'm
Yes,
trying
please.
to be conversational, by using less formal language, when we have conversations, we don't use very formal language. Yet many of us, when we present or we're put on the spot, we become very formal. I was coaching somebody, and in the midst of, he was doing some Q&A, and he was in front of a bunch of technologists, people who work in technology. And somebody asked him a question, and he said, well, knowledge workers do this. And afterwards I said, who was in the audience? He said, knowledge workers. I said, so why don't you say you
You
instead
or
of saying
we.
knowledge workers? It's much more conversational. So there are things we can do in the language we use and the way we see the environment to help us. So if we see it as conversational, we won't feel like there's a right way to do it.
We got a fabulous question
Mhm.
in the chat here.
Sure.
Every day, I have to use the elevator with my neighbors. As I descend from the top floor, I feel the awkwardness of silence in the enclosed space.
Yes.
How do I break the ice? Love this question.
Yeah, so this is really talking about small talk, right?
Yep.
Chit chat. And I think small talk gets a really bad rap. And I think we should rebrand it. A lot of good, big things can happen during small talk. You can learn information about others, you can connect, you can find ways to collaborate. We have a lot of problems with starting it and ending it. And the question is really about how do you initiate? A great way to initiate is just to point to something in the environment, in the context. So if you're in an elevator and there's some music playing, you might say, gosh, I haven't heard this song in a decade. Or have you ever heard these people live? We can comment on things. I was in when I was writing the book and writing this particular chapter, I was actually at a conference and I walked into a room of a bunch of people I didn't know and I wanted to start conversation. And I looked around the room and everybody was wearing blue shirts. It wasn't like a uniform, it was just
You mean like the
coincidental.
two of us right now?
Yeah, right, exactly. And so I went up to somebody I didn't know, and I said, "Did I miss the memo? Everybody's wearing blue shirts." And the person laughed a little, and then we had this great conversation about where we came from, why we were here, and it really started it. But it all came from this notion of just an observation. So sometimes observations, sometimes highlighting what's going on in the environment. That's all you need to get started.
I love, love, love that. Libby in LinkedIn has a longer comment, and
Yeah,
but I want to say it because I'm gonna read it, and then I just want you to comment on it because she's not really
sure.
asking a question, but she's making a really good point. Some people seem to think they have to talk for business reasons but really nothing needs to be added. You've already talked a little bit about that, the paraphrasing thing. For example, this is the part I wanted to get to. For example, sometimes I am quiet because I am processing.
Mhm.
And others have commented that they thought I was not listening or participating. What can Libby do so that people recognize that she is engaged, that she is thinking, right?
Right.
Um, it's
So there are things like we talked about. There are things that you can do that are just helping the conversation move on. I interviewed somebody for the book who had this really nice analogy. He said, "All of us want to feel like when we are communicating that we're building this gorgeous cathedral. But sometimes the most important thing to do is just bring a brick to the party. So you don't have to create the whole big cathedral. You can just add a brick to it. And adding that brick to it could be very helpful because a brick in the right place means that cathedral can be built. So if you can just paraphrase, or you can ask a question, or you can connect ideas, you're building that building, but you're doing it one brick at a time. Now, there are things that she can do also non-verbally to signal that she's interested. Leaning in, nodding as somebody says something, taking notes. So there are lots of ways to signal that you're engaged without actually speaking. In the book, I rely a lot on improvisation, and I've had wonderful improv mentors. I co teach with somebody named Adam Tobin. He's an awesome improviser. And he and others have taught me great sayings from improv that I think just really stick with me and help. And there's one I love, and it says, "Don't just do something, stand there." And that sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes the most important thing you can do, as in the case we were just talking about, is nothing. You want the meeting to end, you want it to move forward. Maybe not saying something is just what needs to be done in that moment.
Libby also says to our earlier point, she says, usually I just say, hi, welcome to the elevator. I love that. And I'm confident someday I will say that. Uh, now, of the four mindset steps of the six,
Mhm.
the one that probably, and you said it as well, but that we probably ought to talk about just a little bit is the listen step. And
Mhm.
we've hinted at it because if I'm going to paraphrase, I have to have listened
Right.
to do that effectively. Is there anything else you want to say quickly about the listen step as it relates to us being more effective at at talking on cue?
So listening is incredibly important in any communication. Most of us are not very good at listening. We listen just enough to get the gist of what somebody is saying, and then we start rehearsing, we start evaluating, we start judging. We need to listen deeply to understand the nuance of what's needed in the moment. Let me give you an example. Let's say, Kevin, you and I come out of a meeting and you look to me and you say, "Hey, Matt, how did you think that went?" I heard at one level, Kevin wants feedback. Well, Kevin, I didn't think we did well here. You should have done that there. We could have done that there. And I just start itemizing all these things we could have done. When in fact, if I would have really listened deeply, I might have noticed that you spoke more softly than usual, that you were looking out the window as you asked me that question. Maybe I misread the whole thing. And really, what you wanted was support in that moment because you felt it didn't go well. But I just heard very superficially the word feedback, and I went into this whole heuristic way of thinking. So to listen better, I borrow an approach from one of my colleagues at Stanford's Business School. His name's Collins Dobbs. He teaches courses on crucial, really important conversations, and he has a methodology that works beautifully for listening. It is called pace, space, grace. To listen well, you need to slow things down. We move so quickly in our communication. We need to actually slow ourselves down so that we can listen well. Additionally, we have to give ourselves space. Now, sometimes this means physical space. Kevin, you and I look like we're of a similar vintage. I don't know about you, but when I'm in a
Well, my
loud
kids are
environment,
older than yours. That much I know.
yeah,
We've had
okay.
that
But I
conversation
but
already.
I still can't hear well. So I have to physically move to a space that's quieter. But I also mean mental space. I have to give myself the permission to be present and free up my mind to actually really pay attention. So pace and space, and then grace. When I listen to somebody, I also, part of the thing about getting older is you get a little wiser, and we've seen things before. So as I'm listening to somebody, I might say, I'm sort of feeling something here. And we have to honor and respect that. We have to give ourselves a little bit of grace to listen to our intuition, to listen to our prior experience. So as we're listening, it's not just about focusing on the other person, which is important, but we're also listening internally to our intuition. So with a little pace, space, and grace, we can all be better listeners.
Love that. So someone is out there thinking, okay, when are they going to actually talk about when I say something? I mean, obviously, you've talked about a lot of things, but we've really been talking about the mindset piece more than the
Right.
messaging piece. So obviously, you've given us some tools to help us and help us give ourselves some time and space to think about what our response is going to be and that sort of thing. But then, whatever the content is, we need to put it into a package to deliver it. And you and I would agree, I know that we would, having read your book, that when we have a structure or structures that we can use, it makes it far easier for us to then load the content into the framework, if you will.
That's
So
exactly right.
very quickly,
Yeah.
talk about this a little bit. Give us an example of a structure that we might use,
Mhm.
and let's use it now. We've talked about all sorts of situations, but now let's talk about that one. You're in the meeting, your boss's boss, someone, the customer, uh, the banker, whomever asks you the question, and you need to respond. So it's really more of a potentially higher stakes
Mhm.
situation. What what? Give us an example. There are multiple structures, but give us an example of a structure that we might use in that situation.
Absolutely. So, structure to me is just a logical connection of ideas. It's not a list. It's not looking at a PowerPoint slide sorter. It's a logical connection of ideas. And a structure really serves as a recipe. And I love how you described it, Kevin. So, all we have to, if you have a recipe, all you have to do is put the ingredients in, and you're likely to get a good dish. That's what structure does, is it gives you a place to put your ideas so they come out in a clear, concise way. So if you were to ask me questions, in the back of the book, the second part of the book, I have lots of situations. One of them
Mhm.
is answering questions. And I have a structure I've been teaching for years for answering questions. I call it ADD, for adding value. You answer the question clearly and concisely. You then, the first D stands for detailed example. So you give an example that reinforces the answer you gave. And then the second D is describe the value. What does this mean? Let me give you a real classic example. Let's say you're interviewing me for a job, and you're interviewing me to be a teacher of communication, which is what I do. You might ask me the question, "What's your experience? How long have you been? What's your experience?" I might say, "I've been teaching for 25 years." That's my answer. I've taught both in the academic world and the corporate world. That's my example. What this means is if you hire me, I can tailor my teaching to the needs of your students. That's the second D, the relevance. So, do you see that simply going through those three steps, I can then come away with a very concise and clear answer? When you communicate on the spot, you have to decide what to say and how to say it. The structure gives you the how.
Gives you
So,
the
when
how.
you're
That's
put on the
exactly right.
spot, you have that roadmap you need.
Yeah. Hey, or another example would be, that's a really great question. I have three initial thoughts.
Okay. Yeah.
Lay out the three thoughts and then
Yeah.
go to relevance, right? So like there's
Yeah.
and you lay out several
Mhm.
structure examples. I just throw a different one out there in the moment
Sure.
because I think that some people might be coming to the book sort
Mhm.
of wanting unconsciously wanting step five, this one right
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
and it's incredibly valuable. But I hope that everyone realizes that we spent like 80% of our time on the mindset piece.
Yeah.
Because if you get that part right, and then you have this how, then you're pretty much good to go. We didn't really talk much about focus, which is the last step, but I'm looking at our time, and I do
Mhm.
want to ask you this question because we do live in a world where we
Yes.
might be doing having this be put on the spot
Right.
remotely. Is there
Yes.
any specific things you would add to this if I am doing it virtually, I'm doing it remotely, I'm doing it like you and I are having this conversation right
Right.
now? Any specific things you would say there?
Yes, I'll say 2, and one will actually help with that focus piece. It is incredibly important as we become more virtual and we do hybrid that you have to make things more concise and focused. because people's attention spans when we're virtual are lower than they are when we're in person. So I need to make everything tight and concise. How do I do that? I have a clear goal in mind and I think about what's the most important for you. I make myself other focused. So when I'm talking, I say, what would be the most helpful for them? And that focus on the relevance and having a goal makes us more concise. The other thing we have to do is we have to be more engaging. I have to ask questions. I have to use the chat feature, the reactions, and all of that because I need to pull people in. I don't have them captured in the same room with me and they can be doing lots of other things. So by asking them to do relevant activities engages them. So it is through that focus and engagement that we can be better virtual communicators.
So, Matt, is there anything you wish I would have asked that I didn't?
That I love that question. I teach people for interviewing skills that's a great question to ask as an interviewer going through that process. So thank you for that question. I guess the one thing that I wish you would have asked is this something everybody can do? And the answer is absolutely yes. You know, a lot of people feel I just don't have the gift of gab. I'm an introvert or I'm a nervous speaker and I just can't do it. I am here to tell you from my personal life, from the hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people I've taught and the people I've coached, you can get better at it. It takes time. You have to do repetition, reflection, and feedback to
It's a
get there, but
skill,
you can.
everybody. If it's a skill, you can learn it, right?
Absolutely. Now, coming from two learning and development people, of course we believe that. But if people take the time to really reflect, they can see that they can do it too. So yes, people can get better for sure.
There's been a time you've done it well, or at least
Mhm.
okay. And so if you've done it once, you can do it again. And that's the way you have to
Absolutely.
think about it. I want to shift gears before we finish, Matt. Really enjoyed having you. And we've
Thank
sort
you.
of talked about the work and the message and all of that. But I want to talk a little bit more about you. We sort of started
Mhm.
with you, we'll sort of end with you. So, what do you do, Matt, for fun?
So I love hiking. I love the outdoors. My wife and I hike and walk all the time. My boys and I, they're older now. We actually, this sounds kind of silly, but we've taken up archery. We like to go and we go to an archery range. I'm much better at archery than golf. I wanted to find a sport that my kids would be interested in and one that's challenging to me. So things outdoors are things that I like to do.
And the only thing you knew I was going to ask you, the only thing that everybody that wasn't spontaneous,
Right.
really, is this question. So, Matt, what are you reading these days?
So I am rereading one of my favorite books. This was a life-changing book for me. It's a book by Patricia Ryan Madsen, and it is called Improv Wisdom. When people hear the word improv, they think, oh, up on stage being funny. When you are trying to learn how to be more spontaneous, how to be more present in the moment, how to be more open to opportunity, this book is phenomenal. It's a short book, has amazing life lessons. It has fundamentally changed the way I approach the world. So, Improv Wisdom is a book. I probably read it once every 2 or 3 years, just because it reminds me of the things I really want to be working on.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. She says, I wish I could be blessed one day to learn from you in person. But you know what? In person or not, it's right here. And you asked a question. You gave us a great answer. We got you some ideas to help you with the elevator dilemma, if you will. And so maybe now the question you most hoped I would ask you, which is, where can we go to learn more about you, get connected with you, and get a copy of this book?
Well, we're doing LinkedIn work. I am a huge user of LinkedIn. Please link in with me. It's a great way to get me to get engaged, and we can talk and answer questions. MattAbrahams.com is a great place to go. You'll see the books I've written, lots of resources I've posted, videos, documents, and then finally, if you like podcasts, Think Fast, Talk Smart. It's all about communication. Short episodes, 20 minutes each, has a lot of good information for anybody hoping to hone their communication skills.
MattAbrahams.com, everybody. And so so now before we go, and before I thank Matt again, the question for all of you, the question I ask you every single episode. Now what? What are you going to do as a result of what you heard? You got some very practical things that you could do, including what you could do on an elevator, what you could do when you get asked a question in a situation, what you could do to make better small talk, whatever it is. Think of, maybe the idea is I'm going to just use an observation to break the ice. Maybe the idea is I'm going to use this ADD model. Maybe I'm going to think more about changing the pace and creating more space when I'm listening. I don't know what it is for you. So just a few of the things that I wrote down. But the most important thing that you can take from the last 35 minutes is that you take action on it. Because if you don't act, sort of what's the point? There probably could have been more entertaining ways to spend 35 minutes. But if you take action, if you ask yourself this question and then take action on your answer, this will be a really valuable way to have spent 35 minutes. Matt, thank you so much for being here. Such a pleasure to have you. I was looking forward to it. Had a little delay, but that's okay. And I'm so pleased that we had the chance to have this conversation. Thanks for being here.
Kevin, thank you so much. I appreciate your grace in that delay, and it has been a great conversation.
So if this is your first time joining us, I hope you'll come back. If you're finding this somewhere else, watching it on YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever, you can go to remarkablepodcast.com to get access to all past 399 episodes. And if you are watching us, wherever you're listening to us, wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you hit like, hit subscribe, tell a friend to join us next week, because we'll be back again next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.